I have always loved comic books. Problem is, I grew up kind of poor. I didn't have a lot of money to spend, so the only access to comics that I had was the local library. They had like 2 shelves of comics, and what they had in stock had all been manhandled by a bunch of snotty kids. Like me. So I grew up rereading the same 6 issues over and over until all the pages had fallen out. Now I'm a grown man. I've moved on to greater things, but something in the back of my mind kept pulling me back to the good old days. And that's when I realized, I've got money now. And I think I'd like to finish the stories that I started when I was younger. This is Ultimate Nostalgia. Welcome to Ultimate Nostalgia. I am your host, Comic Man Boy. Nope, I don't like it, and we're going to move right along. Ultimate Nostalgia, it's a new show on the channel where I talk about comic books. It's pretty much explained in the intro you just watched. Now I have a wife who makes more money than me, and I can steal her credit card anytime I want. So last year I decided to start collecting comic books, and I started with Ultimate Marvel. It's a comic universe that Marvel started in 2000, and our local library had a lot of those specific comics. So that's the most of any universe I've ever read, and I've been able to collect it all. Now, not all of Ultimate Marvel because it was rebooted like 6 times, but I've collected from its inception in the year 2000, which was Ultimate Spider-Man, up to the huge crossover event Ultimatum, which included all of the other characters that they'd introduced to the Ultimate Marvel universe. From what I've heard, a lot of people did not like Ultimatum, but we'll find out if it's good when we get there. So this is going to be a fun new journey that you and I can take together reading through old comic books. But, in the wise words of the unnamed man from The Legend of Zelda, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Wow! A wild David appears. That's right, it's David from his own YouTube channel, Shelf Help Gaming, I know. The pun is terrible, but his videos are actually quite good, and if you haven't subscribed to his channel already, you should, if you like board games. But David is going to be joining me on my comic adventure, and it's going to be a lot of fun, right, David?
Oh, yeah. Loads of fun.
Yeah, I decided I wanted to start collecting comic books and finish the stories I started when I was a kid, and I invited you to come to the grand opening of a comic book store near where we live. And I bought a few things, and you ended up buying a lot more things.
And not that day. I only bought one comic book that day.
Yeah, but I've been to your house since. And
since then, it has exploded, yeah.
You've bought a lot of comic books. And eventually, hopefully, we can branch out from the Ultimate Marvel universe. I just wanted to start with Ultimate Marvel because I feel like for both of us, that's probably what we've read the most of, right?
In the early childhood, yes.
Right, from when we were picking up the table scraps
exactly.
that were left to us, like the dogs we are at our public library. We read a whole lot of Ultimate Spider-Man and a whole lot of Ultimate X-Men, and that was about it. They had a couple other
pretty much
like random pieces at the library, but not a lot. They had a really cool comic called Sojourn. Which I looked up. I was really excited. I was like, oh, I want to collect all these ones. It got canceled, which is it's so sad because I really liked that one. But that one wasn't DC or Marvel. That was an independent. I can't even remember what it was called because they don't exist anymore. So yeah, I figured Ultimate Marvel was the place to start, and from there we can branch out and do lots of things. We might not finish. We can start branching out before we finish Ultimate Marvel, but I wanted to start from Spider-Man and go at least to Ultimatum.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to go through this journey with you, fill in all the gaps of the stories that we read as kids and then finished.
Yeah, I asked you if you'd want to do this, and you said, yeah, that's great. We'll just, casual, we'll record some stuff. And then you sent me, like, 8 gigabytes of crazy man research that you'd done
Yeah.
to explain the entire history of comic books.
Basically, yeah. I've been diving deep into comic book lore and everything, and it like DC alone is just spaghetti. It is
That's the
very
thing.
hard to understand.
That's what I found out too. Like,
Yeah,
it's really hard to get into comic books.
it really, really is. There's terminology that was completely foreign to me when I started collecting these, and just the different ages and the different universes. I had no freaking clue where to begin.
It's just not organized very well. And
No, it's not.
It's not recorded very well. So going back and trying to collect all of Ultimate Marvel was really hard. They're like 6 different types of collections that got, because I didn't want to just buy a whole bunch of floppies. That's too messy, right? So I wanted to get volumes. But there were like 6 different types of collections that went through and got all of the floppies. And like they're the big omnibuses, which is like, oh, that would be cool. I'll get all the omnibus Spider-Mans, but they haven't finished. They hadn't finished. They just barely finished collecting.
So that's what.
But I'd already started a year ago. So
this is the new printing of the first omnibus.
Yeah.
Honestly, these look really good on the shelves, but this is a beast to read.
And it's really thick.
It is really heavy.
So this is my this is my preferred method. I like the smaller volumes.
Trade paperbacks. Yeah.
This is the one that comes right after the omnibus is the first one that I have, and this is also like a good digestible chunk. So I've tried to break down all of Ultimate Marvel into these small volume collections, which will contain somewhere between 4 and 12 floppies. It's not very consistent.
No, it's not.
But some of them are longer than others. So, but we're before we get into any of that, you've got to explain to the audience the entire history of comic books, David.
Yeah. So you're showing the slide on your side?
Yes, I'm showing your PowerPoint presentation, David.
Yeah. We're nerds, right? We got to nerd out.
Yeah. Some of us are still cool, though.
Yeah. So, basically, this is just a basic overview of the history of comics from the inception of the first superhero comic down to the modern age. So we begin in 1938 to 1956.
The Golden Age.
Golden Age of comics. And this was something that was really confusing to me because I thought it went the other direction. You know, I've heard of Golden Age.
You thought it went from bronze to silver to gold?
From bronze to silver, and there was like a...
What an idiot.
Right? But we start with the Golden Age of comics.
So embarrassed to be your brother. You call yourself a nerd.
Right. And so... It started in 1938 with Action Comics from DC.
DC was first, right? That's the first issue of Superman, which is Superman. I included in the intro video.
Exactly, and then shortly after that, we had Detective Comics, where DC gets their name, which was where they introduced Batman, right?
Yeah.
So DC introduced in the Golden Age Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, the first version of the Flash, the first version of Green Lantern, and the Justice Society of America, the JSA.
Not the Justice League.
Not the Justice League yet, yeah. And then Marvel, they started as Timely Comics and then evolved into Atlas Comics before they became Marvel. And in the Golden Age, they really only had 3 flagship heroes. There was Captain America, the Human Torch, which was different from the Human Torch of the Fantastic Four. This was like an android version of some flame boy, right? And then Namor the Submariner.
Famously a Mexican character, right?
Apparently, yes. Okay. Namor, according to modern Disney Marvel, right?
Because there's no amor left in his heart. It's so clever, guys.
So from there, we move on to the Silver Age, which was spans the years from 1956 to 1970, right? And from there, we've got new versions of the Flash and the Green Lantern. We've got new heroes that pick up that mantle. And we've got the Justice League of America.
Do you know, did they name it the Silver Age like when it happened? They're like, hey, we're going to make comics that aren't as good?
No, absolutely not. They, I think the first naming of the Golden Age was in was during the end of the Silver Age.
Yeah.
In fact, Marvel at the time, during the Silver Age, when they revamped all their characters and introduced a lot of them, they called it the Marvel era of comics.
Mm-hmm.
Those terms did not exist at the time of the recording of their inception, right?
I wasn't trying to imply that the Silver Age was bad. People
Right.
love the Silver Age.
The Silver Age, the Silver Age is where it really kicks off. So DC is a little bit confusing. They revealed at one point through a Flash serial that everything that happened in the Golden Age was actually a different universe.
It's Earth 2.
And they named it Earth 2, and everything in the Silver Age was Earth 1, right?
Yes.
Marvel, from its inception, has largely stuck to the same timeline. They've had different
616.
They've had different worlds, different universes, but it's always been the same timeline. DC has reset their timeline so many times it's confusing, right?
And we're starting with one of the ones that isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
we're starting with a different timeline.
Exactly.
It's smaller though. It's easier to start with.
Right. Well, it's technically the same timeline. It's just a different universe within the same timeline.
Okay.
They go concurrently. Right. So, anyways, Marvel at this time, like I said, they referenced this era as the Marvel era. They started with different titles: Tales of Suspense, Tales to Astonish, Strange Tales, and Amazing Fantasy. Amazing Fantasy is where they introduced Spider-Man, right? And they also had Fantastic Four, Daredevil, X-Men, Iron Man, the Hulk, Doctor Strange, and they reintroduced Captain America in the Silver Age from the GoldenAge era. Right? He was frozen and brought him back, and of course the superhero team, the Avengers, right?
Yeah.
So that's
and
where
this is where they turned Namor into a Mexican.
I don't know. I don't know when that happened.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on from there, we got the Bronze Age in 1970 to 1985, and these are more loose years, but it's generally agreed on. Those are generally what happened, and this is when we started to introduce a little bit more darker characters, darker themes. We had DC introduce things like Swamp Thing as a character and Ghost Rider from Marvel. But this is where we started to experiment with a little bit more mature content, right? And so Marvel introduced the death of Gwen Stacy storyline from Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man in 1973.
And then they did it like 100 times.
Yeah. And then we had Secret Wars from Marvel in 1984, and that's where all the superheroes and villains were transported off to this battle world, and they fight each other and stuff. And that's where Spider-Man gets his black symbiote suit, right? And on DC side, wrapping up the Bronze Age, putting an end to that, was their first big reset of their timeline, Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985. This is when Earths 1 and Earth 2 characters got together, and along with all the multiverse, and bought the Anti-Monitor and collapsed the multiverse into one universe, moving on with their reboot into the present age.
It's the first time they've ever done a reboot.
First time. Okay. And then so previously,
comic books are confusing.
I know, right? Previously, it was just two different worlds, two different universes that exist simultaneously. This was DC's first hard reboot to the timeline and restarted everything. So then we move on to the modern age, which is officially the last classification, everything from 1985 to the present. And that's the problem with naming something the modern age,
right?
Is it was modern afterwards. 40 years ago, right? So but yeah, technically this is the last official classification, is the modern age of comics. This is when you had everything in DC is after this is referred to post-crisis. So they did a reboot. They did modern retellings that were very dark and gritty. They had Batman Year One, which is a retelling of Batman's origin that's fantastic. They also had The Dark Knight Returns. Both of those were by Frank Miller. They had Superman Man of Steel, run by John Byrne. That was a fantastic comic, and that kept going on until up and through the death and return of Superman. And then they had...
I remember when the Death of Superman came out. It was at a Scholastic book fair, and I saw this little floppy, and I was like, you can't kill Superman. What are you doing? And I read it, and then we bought a bunch of those.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, we rented them from the library and only just now bought them a year ago.
Yep. Yeah, there were massive holes in that story.
Yeah.
We jumped all over the place with that one. Yeah. So anyway, but then you also get at this time the George Perez's infamous run on Wonder Woman Volume 2 and Mark Waid's run on the Flash. So those were very very iconic, very well rated comic runs from DC. And this is where a lot of people start their comic journey. It's in the modern age.
It's not a bad place to start.
Absolutely, yeah, especially on the DC side.
There's a lot of good stuff in the olden days, but they're also really kind of campy.
Definitely, especially in the Golden and Silver Age, it's very campy. Yeah, So, and then on the Marvel side, they continued with their continuity from Earth 616 in their main universe, but again, darker stories. So you got Spider-Man with the symbiote suit. We got introduction to characters like Venom and Carnage. We had Daredevil Born Again, which is a very dark storyline talking
about, for the first time ever, never to be reborn ever again.
Never again, yes. And then Daredevil Man Without Fear, which is a fantastic comic. It's basically Batman Year One for Daredevil.
Right.
In fact, I think I might like it better than Batman Year One. It's fantastic. And then finally, we've got in the year 2000, what we're talking about, the Ultimate Marvel run, which is a different designation. It's Earth 1610, right? So again, that's the last main classification, the official classification. Although some people have tried, and I agree, that to make another classification. So a lot of people consider everything from like 2011 to 2012-ish and the present as the postmodern age.
It's almost like there's a giant shift
almost
that happens in 2011.
And there's some interesting stuff still that happens in this area. It's not all bad, but it gets wacky, man.
Yeah.
So DC decided to have their second huge reset after several different crises. They had I didn't put on the slide, but they've got Final Crisis and Infinite Crisis.
Was it Crisis on the Limit as X goes to Infinity Earths?
That would be a good comic. I would read that. But after both of those crises, they
That's
have
a math
Flashpoint.
joke.
For all you nerds out there.
Can't imagine any nerds would be watching the show.
No, none at all. But yeah, so DC had their Flashpoint event in 2011, which basically reset their entire universe yet again. And afterwards,
it's always the Flash that does it.
It really is, yeah.
Because he can go so fast, he goes back in time and stuff, you know.
Yeah. So then after that, DC has their New 52 universe, which ran for several years in 2011 until they decided to do a soft reboot for the DC Rebirth in 2016.
Yeah.
And then they did another soft reboot in Infinite Frontier in 2021, and then another one only a year later of Dawn of DC. And there's other like rebrandings in there that I didn't even mention, but those are the main soft reboots that have happened. They're in a really, really weird state right now.
Yes.
And then same thing with Marvel. They started in 2012 with Marvel Now,
and part of that was in the like 11 reboots of the Ultimate Universe.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So there was,
but also the regular universe. It's very confusing.
It is very confusing. So they had Ultimate Spider-Man, and then they had Spider-Man Ultimate Marvel or something. And then
Ultimate Comic
Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yes.
But that was just a renaming. That wasn't a reboot or anything. But yeah, they renamed it several times, and then they went back to the old numbering.
Yeah, they changed the numbering again several times.
To the old numbering. They do that all the time.
It's really hard to collect, guys.
It's so bad. It's awful. Anyway, so then they had their major first major crossover since in the postmodern age with Spider-Verse, which is pretty highly rated, 2014. And then they tried to do Secret Wars again in 2015.
Secret Wars 2.
That wasn't very, and they did another.
That was also the technical end of the Ultimate Universe.
Yes,
They
because
had
after
the
that,
Ultimate Marvel, what was the Ultimate Comics, which it had been renamed Ultimate Comics Marvel Universe, and the regular 616
right?
collided in Secret Wars, and that like destroyed all timelines, and they started from scratch.
Yes, and they didn't reboot it yet, right? So
It was
it was
definitely the end of the Ultimate Universe, never to come back again, right,
yeah,
David?
right,
Right?
right, right, right. No, no, not right. Yeah. So after Secret Wars, they rebooted their main continuity again with Marvel Now 2.0 in 2015, and simultaneously there was the all new, all different Marvel also in
Yes.
2015, and then the Marvel Legacy in 2017, and all three of those were concurrent with each other.
Yeah.
And then you've got the second Spider crossover event, Spider-Geddon in 2018, and
Yeah.
then finally in 2023, the
What? They
Ultimate
rebooted the Ultimate
Universe,
Universe again?
which is designated as Earth 6160, not to be confused with the Ultimate Marvel in 2000 of Earth 1610.
Look,
Right?
it's fine. Look, if you want this is what infuriates me is that they're calling it the Ultimate Universe.
Right.
Because it's literally not.
Yeah.
Spider-Man is spoilers. Spider-Man dies in the Ultimate Universe, and the
Morales
first
picks up
comic
there.
that they
Yeah.
used to reboot the Ultimate Universe in last year was the Spider-Man comic. But he's an adult and he has kids now. It actually sounds kind of interesting. It would be fun to see an adult Spider-Man with kids. But
Yeah.
just don't call it Ultimate Spider-Man. I'd like just call it something
call it
else.
something else,
It's
exactly,
not. It's
yeah.
literally a different universe. Marvel's
Yeah.
so dumb right now. Ugh.
Comics are so confusing. Well, DC too. They're just yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, we want to read through
We want to
the
hold hands and
Ultimate
jump
Marvel.
into the void together.
Yeah. Ultimate Marvel, not Ultimate Comics and not Ultimate Universe, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if this series
So-
does well, we could go on into Ultimate Comics. It's actually after Ultimatum. It's really short because they kept trying to
because
reboot
they keep rebooting
and,
it. Yeah,
and
exactly.
it didn't last very long because it wasn't
Yeah.
very popular.
I've heard some of the stuff from DC. The new 52 Batman stuff was pretty good because they largely ignored the reboot. It's like, oh yeah, everything that happened before in Batman still happened. We're not going to retell it. It just happened within a 5-year time period instead of
Technically
the
rebooted,
years
but it
and years
happened
and
the
years of
same
stuff.
way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I've heard that Batman 52 is actually pretty darn good. I do want to get that.
I've heard horrible things from the all new, all different Marvel. So
yeah. But anyway, so that's basic history of comic books through the ages.
Yeah.
Now, of course, superheroes don't exist only in comic books. They have permeated pop culture for
Right.
years. So just zooming in here, I've got zooming in here on the timeline. I've got just some highlights of some of the more important comic book, mostly movies and TV series that were important to us in our lives.
Yeah.
Right. So these are ones that we were aware of before we really got into comics, discovered comics, right?
Right.
So in the 60s and 70s, of course, there was the campy Adam West Batman,
which they're
so good.
They are genuinely good. Those are that is like it started with the movie and then they did the TV show.
Actually,
Or was it the other way around?
The movie was supposed to be first, but they didn't finish it. So they actually had the first season and then the movie and then the second 2 seasons.
It's
of the show.
hilarious.
It's fantastic.
It is a great comedy. And
Yeah.
it's not like unintentionally funny. It's supposed to be a comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Superman movies you have written down there, which were they're fantastic.
Superman 1 and 2. I don't think we saw any of the other ones before then, but Superman 1 and 2 were very important. Superman 2, of course, was in the 80s.
We didn't watch them in the
right?
60s, though.
No.
We watched them later.
No, of course not. This is a timeline of when they happened, not when we...
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Superman 2, then in 1898, it was Tim Burton's Batman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again,
and
we had these kind of mirrored on VHS.
Those kind of mirrored the current age where things started getting darker, right?
Yes.
Tim Burton really took, it was still campy in a way, but
Right.
also very dark, especially the second one, right, with the penguin.
Yeah.
Gets very dark. And then for some reason they went the opposite direction and started getting campy again with Batman and Robin. So
Yeah, and Batman Forever before that too.
oh, but Batman Forever's great.
Yeah.
Very campy, but very great.
Extremely
and Val
campy.
Kilmer is the best Batman. So
I did enjoy Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer's such a good actor.
He is. But yeah, I don't think at the time that we had watched Batman Forever, though. I know we watched the first Tim Burton Batman, and
Mom didn't like that one.
Yeah.
No, David, we definitely watched it.
Not
didn't know we'd watched it.
I know I hadn't seen Batman Returns for years. It was years until I saw that one. We weren't allowed to see that one because, again, it was a little bit darker, and it was a lot of bit sexy, too. Yeah,
rubber lips.
There's
that's Batman. That's
Batman and Robin. No, Catwoman in there was very overtly
sensual.
On the nose sensual. Yeah, there's several not so cleverly hidden innuendos in that film, but
right.
But anyway, so I also put there the Batman animated series in 1992. We didn't watch that a whole lot, but we didn't have TV.
We didn't have TV,
cable or whatever. It was before cable, but we did have friends that had those, so we did see a couple episodes here and there. But I distinctly remember going to the theater to watch Batman and Robin when it came out in 1997, and we thought it was the coolest thing
honestly,
ever, man.
Honestly, when you're a kid, that movie rocks.
For sure. Now, you have to keep in mind, we grew up in a fairly poor family, right? We weren't poor. We were solidly middle class, but we had 9 children in our family.
Yeah.
And so we never,
even being middle class, we couldn't afford to go to the theater.
We never went to the theater when they first came out. We had to wait back when they had dollar theaters. If you waited for 3 or 4 months after a movie's release, it came to the dollar theater, and you can go to see the movies for $1.
Yeah,
and that's what we did almost exclusively. I think I can count on one hand the times that we actually went to the real expensive theater, right?
The first time I went to the expensive theater, it wasn't with our famai.
Yeah, same here. It's on this slideshow.
It was with a friend who wanted to go see Lord of the Rings with me.
Yeah.
And I am eternally grateful. What an experience.
Yeah. But yeah, so Batman and Robin, that was fantastic. So then
I also remember renting from the library. They had a couple DVDs of the Batman animated series.
Yes, you're right.
So we saw a little bit of it. We just couldn't. Right. It wasn't serialized.
And Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, they're ingrained in pop culture.
Right.
Everyone knew who they were, right?
Yeah.
It's not like we're completely oblivious, right? But then moving on in the early 2000s, we had Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2002.
Yeah.
I remember seeing this film, and I was just blown away how amazing.
It's the best superhero movie ever made.
Right? Well, Spider-Man 2 is a little better. But yeah, at the time, it was the best thing.
Right.
That we'd ever seen, right? And then the year after that, we had Daredevil.
Best superhero movie of all time.
Again, at the time, as kids, we're like, Daredevil's so cool.
It's a pretty good movie when you're a kid, okay?
Yeah. But I remember seeing both of those movies.
It's also a little bit sexy, too.
A little bit. Yeah, I remember seeing both of those movies, though, and some of our friends who were into comics, they were like, that's not accurate. Spider-Man doesn't have the webs coming from his wrist, or Daredevil shouldn't do
better.
Whatever.
Okay, I like it. Look, he's got the powers of a spider, and for some reason, the only powers are he's got sticky skin and strength. Why doesn't he shoot webs out of his butt?
Spidey sense.
Why can't he shoot webs out of his butt?
Yeah, fair point.
But I also like the fact that he's smart and he can make his own web fluid. So it's like a toss-up for me. I'm a fan of.
It was a choice.
I'm a fan of wrist spider juice.
Yeah. So then in May...
Those movies are actually another reason why I picked Ultimate Marvel to start with, because Ultimate Marvel started in 2000, and these movies basic, like the Spider-Man movies, at least the first one, basically steals directly from Ultimate Marvel. It's
Yes.
not a 1-to-1, but it's pretty dang close.
It's a lot closer. The origin is a lot closer
Yes.
to Ultimate Spider-Man.
Like he
than
clearly read
original
Ultimate
Amazing
Marvel.
Spider-Man.
It's very much inspired from the new version of the origin story.
And that would make sense too. You have a new movie coming out with a superhero. You want to promote the
current
brand
version
new
of it,
stuff that's coming out. I mean, Amazing Spider-Man never stopped. It's still going on today. It was still going on continuously with in the original universe. But the Ultimate universe was the new hot thing. So, but yeah. So then
it's a new place you can jump in.
Yeah. This is going a long time.
It has.
This is supposed to be like 10
the rest of the videos in this series are not going to be this long,
right?
Unless David comes up with more powerful.
You never know, man. You never know. Yeah. So then here we get to it. Finally, in May and June of 2004, this is when it happens, baby.
This was David's superhero origin story.
This is my origin story. This is my awakening. This is my discovering comics and then bringing them home to my little family and saying, "Hey, bro, read this."
This is when David hit puberty and started asking our parents some very personal questions.
Yeah. So in our school that we went to,
this is when David finally watched Batman Returns.
Not yet, bro. I hadn't watched it yet. So in May of 2004, I was a freshman in high school, which made you in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And our high school, they did, it was a charter school. And so the last 2 weeks of school, you didn't have regular classes. You signed up for
a discovery project.
Discovery projects, bro. They were amazing.
So cool. Such a cool idea. And every teacher got to host their own, like, hey, I'm going to do a 2-week course of whatever I feel like doing, and you can pick which teacher you thought was coolest, or which subject you thought was the most fun.
Yeah, and the music teacher, they always let's make an album together, and they actually published an album, and there was a movie making one, and
I remember one of the discovery projects. And some of the teachers would go in on it together, so it was like a group of 2 or 3 if they wanted to do a bigger one. I went to Mexico for 2 weeks as a discovery project.
Some of them were pretty crazy.
One of the ones I distinctly remember was they planned out basically like a military boot camp, and they made the kids do a bunch of push-ups and taught them how to do stealth, and their final project was a giant game of capture the flag where they had to use all of the skills that they'd accumulated.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah. So this year the freshmen get their last pick, right? So I really wanted to do a video production class to make a little short film.
Yeah.
And it filled up quick and I didn't get it. And I put this as my second choice. And originally I didn't get it, but someone dropped out. So I got this course, and it was just comic books all day, like history of comic books. We went to the comic book store. We bought comics. We took home some comics. My teacher had a vast collection of comics. And for some reason, he trusted us enough to take them home and read them, his own personal copies.
Yeah, your teacher's insane.
I know, right? So I came home with Batman Year One, fantastic retelling of Batman origin story.
Batman Year One is the comic that the newest Batman movie is based on.
Yes.
Roughly.
Yeah, and Christopher Nolan also took massive inspiration from Batman Year One as well.
Right.
But very fantastic comic there. And then we also had Fantastic First. These are ones that we bought and took home with us. This is every first occurrence. Oh, look, there's Spider-Man right there. This is the first occurrence of every single superhero, all the main superheroes in Marvel.
The Marvel Universe, yeah.
In the Marvel Universe. And it was fantastic. There were some that I didn't even know about. Here's their Howling Commandos. Sergeant Fury.
It's a good
Sergeant
comic.
Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. Right? That was
I really like the first appearance of Captain America. I think it's really good.
Yeah. So there we go. Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos. But anyways, so that was lots of fun. I also took this one home, which I actually never read. This is Essential X-Men.
I read that one.
Chris Claremont, you did read it, and I didn't, because for some reason they decided to do the non-colored versions of these prints, and I couldn't do it. I tried so hard. I've since gotten these comics in.
I don't remember anything about that, because I was like right? 7 when I read it.
Exactly. So those are the ones we went home with from the thing. But we also, I'm pretty sure at the time, was introduced to, oh goodness, there's awful glare. Introduced to Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, which is basically the retelling of Daredevil's origin story, just like Batman Year One, and it was dark and gritty and wonderful. And then also Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, very dark, amazing story.
Yeah, that's the one where Batman kills people. Death
of Superman, right here.
Super good.
Just, yeah, wow. Doomsday was awesome. Just blew my mind. And then
completely disappointed in Doomsday's on-screen appearance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then I was introduced to this, Kingdom Come. This is a hard copy that I picked up later on, but this has art by Alex Ross, who does watercolor for his art, and it's just phenomenal.
It's the best comic book I think I've ever read. So.
It was absolutely fantastic. And for some reason, again, he let us borrow his copy and take it home. And I took it home and said, bro, you got to read this because this is fantastic.
And I did, and it was fantastic.
And then also from Alex Ross, there's the Marvels, which has equally amazing art. Just going over some of the stories in
that's the one history. Where it's like a snapshot of Marvel history from the perspective of just citizens, right?
Yeah, basically.
They're watching the superheroes fight.
There's a reporter that's kind of like
it's really good
together this stuff. It's really fantastic. I think it falls apart a little bit in the finale, where he wraps up the story and basically says, this is not my story to tell. I'm not going to tell it. I'm like, oh, come on, bro. You've been anyway. But that was that. And good. We also we made our own comic book. And this is really bad, and I'm not going to open it.
Best comic book of all time.
No. Do you know what's the best?
No, Psycho Man is the best one. No, what was that one
called? Blue Dragon and the Outcast. It's this terrible font that they chose on there. But we all contributed. I'll show you one.
Oh, that was your class.
This is the class that we did. I drew that hand coming out.
That's not bad.
And I drew some of the other ones too, but a lot of the art is really bad. And I'm not going to show this to you, but maybe if we get enough likes on it,
we'll do a live read of Blue Dragon and the Outcast. Do you have our Psycho Man comics? We invented a superhero called Psycho Man.
Psycho Man, written and illustrated by David and Alan Bentley.
Yeah, baby. It's so good.
It's bad.
It was entirely traced.
Yes, we had a how to draw book, and we
would trace the figures
over and over again. And then when we had to make them smaller, you could totally tell because it was just out of whack. That was fun. But anyway, so that was 2004. Introduced me to comic books.
My senior year, my discovery project was studying the effects of junk food and video games on the human body. And we played we ate junk food and played video games for 2 weeks, and were hooked up to a heart monitor and took our blood pressure every half hour.
That's fantastic.
Because I didn't want to do anything my senior year.
Yeah. So that was May of 2004. I discovered comic books. I brought several home to you and had you read them, and we were just fascinated by them. But again, we didn't have money. We couldn't afford comic books of our own, aside from the few that I actually brought home, right?
Yeah.
So, and I remember this was May in 2004. Our teacher said, "Hey, Spider-Man 2 is coming out in the theater next month, June 2024." And he's like, "Go see it because it's going to be amazing." And I remember wanting to see that movie so bad, but again, we had to wait like 4 or 5 months for it to come to the
sometimes it was
dollar
like
theater.
6 months.
It depends on
before
how
the
good
movie
the
would
movie
show
was,
up in the
right?
dollar theater. Yeah,
If it wasn't a super good run,
would just
maybe it
keep
was
running.
like 2.5 months.
Well, that's the problem.
But
All of the good ones took forever to get to the dollar
So
theater.
I remember that summer was just agony. I was like, oh, I want to see this movie. Mom and Dad, can we please see this movie? And somewhere in that time, I don't know, I'm pretty sure it was you discovered that our local library had a rack of comic books.
It was me.
And so we're like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so we would sit there for hours after school and just like pick through all the comics.
We read most of them in the library too. We checked a lot of them out, but
yeah, we would have to hunt down and say, oh, they finally have issue 7. It fills this gap, whatever. And then we'd like take home, issue 5 through 10
because there were so many that were missing because it's a library. And when they get destroyed, they don't get replaced. They're just gone.
Yeah. So again, that was mostly Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, a few other random stuff, but that was mostly what it was. And so that was when that summer 2004 was when we really started diving into as much as we could possibly from our little local library there.
Yep.
And then so moving on to in the timeline to the late 2000s, we had Batman Begins in 2005 and Iron Man officially beginning the MCU in 2008.
The MCU
right?
started off so good.
It's so good, right? And so by this time we had read comic books. I had gone out and collected a few random ones. I bought my own copy of Kingdom Come, right? Bought my own copy of Death of Superman and that sort of thing. Some other comic runs.
It was bold of them to start with Iron Man because Iron Man was not popular before the movies made him popular.
Yeah, exactly. He took a long time to get popular in the comics.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were already introduced to comic books. Oh, by the way, Iron Man was one of my teacher's favorite comics, superheroes when I took the class, and he didn't have any Iron Man comics. I didn't read
his first appearance. He said fantastic.
Iron Man is amazing. But anyways, so yeah, when we saw Batman Begins and Iron Man, we're like, holy crap, this is awesome. This is accurate to the comic books because we had read Batman Year One and Batman Begins was just like so good, so faithful to it, right? But again, we didn't have a whole lot of money, so we just kind of read comic books, picked up any that we could along the way. And it wasn't until 2 years ago in June 2023 the grand opening of the local comic shop, the Nerd Store, opened. And
we bought a lot of comics.
You saw the advertisement on Facebook or whatever and said, hey, you should come.
They were giving away a bunch of free stuff.
Yeah, there was a drawing. You won some like Godzilla figure or something like that, right?
I won a figurine of King Kong, and it's big.
King Kong, right?
I don't know what to do with it. I've tried to give it away several times.
Yeah, but so I picked up a collection. It was the Marvel's Epic Collection of Amazing Spider-Man, the first several issues of there, like first 20 or so issues. And from there, I decided to collect all of the Ultimate Marvel, not the Ultimate Marvel, the Marvel Epic Collection for a lot of the traditional superheroes. So I started with Spider-Man and Daredevil and X-Men and Fantastic Four, and then I picked up a couple other ones here and there.
You need to send me a picture of your bookshelf so I can put it up on screen.
Yeah, it's grown quite a bit. So, and there's more to come.
Meanwhile, I was just trying to find all of the missing pieces of Ultimate Marvel, and then I go to your house and you've got like, are you collecting this like the Silver Age, Bronze Age?
So it starts in
the modern age.
No, a lot of the old Marvel stuff was in the Silver Age of comics. So going from the Silver Age into the modern age. But then I also started picking up the Ultimate Universe in the omnibuses, at least the ones that they have available. But yeah.
Every time I looked over the list though of pieces that I needed to complete all of Ultimate Marvel, I would find some obscure reference to like an annual that I didn't have.
Yeah.
So actually, just today I think I've completed my collection of Ultimate Marvel up to at least up to Ultimatum, because sometimes the annuals are included in the collections, and then there's like the 0.5s and 1/2s that you're like, oh, it's a special release. Ugh, it's quite frustrating, actually.
Yeah. Comic books are very confusing.
But yeah, so I mean, if you've made it this far, the rest of these videos are not going to be an hour long. We're just going to be reading one volume, and we're going to do Ultimate Marvel in order, and maybe some other comics too. So the first episode, we're going to cover Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, which is titled Power and Responsibility, and it's the first 7 floppies of Ultimate Spider-Man. So that's coming soon. So look forward to that, and much more to come.
If you like board gaming, you can check out my YouTube channel, Shelf Help Gaming, for game reviews, playthroughs, and strategic help.
So I hope you join us, read some comics, and get that dopamine flowing with those good old nostalgia juices. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
See ya.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If it's true, please take a minute to subscribe to the channel, and you can join us along for the ride. And if you pay me, I'll try to be more entertaining, so please consider joining Patreon and getting your name in the credits with pride.
I'd buy that for $1.